so back on our notes for 1-4, we left off here. Pythagorean identities, just remember that that's, of course, Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but our values that we're really using are x's, y's, and r's. So it's the same thing as x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Okay, and then quotient identities, here's a good one to remember. Did you know that tangent is equal to sine over cosine? Did you know that? Yeah, watch how cool this is. So, sine, remember, is y over r, and cosine is x over r. What do you do when you divide a fraction by a fraction? How do you actually do that? Well, I multiply, instead of dividing by a fraction, isn't that the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal? Right. You remember keep, change, flip?
Yep.
You keep the numerator, you change to multiplication, and you flip the denominator over. So when I have this, what can I do with those r's? They just cancel out, and I'm left with y over x, which is tangent. How cool! So if you divide sine by cosine of a given angle, you will always get the tangent of that angle. Okay? So that can come in handy.
Divide cosine by sine, both r's being the bottom, so wouldn't that give you tangent squared?
If you divide cosine by sine? Is that what you said?
Yeah, because if you have both r's in the bottom.
You wouldn't, though, because
Oh, that would be.
you would get cotangent, though. So that's, if you want to add that, cotangent would just be the reciprocal, cosine divided by sine. And basically for the same reason. Okay, so let's try this letter F here. What the heck is going on with this thing? Find cosine and tangent given that sine is that. Now, you were just doing a bunch of problems where it gave you sine, but then it asked for cosecant. You're like, oh, I just take the reciprocal. The problem is, I don't just take the reciprocal to get cosine or tangent. So it's going to involve a little bit more work, but totally doable. So I highly recommend that we draw a sketch again, okay? So remember what sine is. Sine is just y over r. And it also tells me that cosine is positive. So let's see what I have going on here. I have a negative y. So what quadrants have negative y's? 3 and 4. So I know I'm in either 3 or 4. And which one has a cosine that's positive out of 3 and 4? 4. So I know I'm in the 4th quadrant. Is everybody okay with how we reasoned our way there? Sine is y over r. I know I have a negative y value, so I'm down to these 2 quadrants, and I need cosine to be positive, and that will only happen here for all these things to be true. Okay? So I know my r, which is the length of the hypotenuse, is 3. I know this y value is negative root 2, but this is a first. This time I don't know what the x is. Exactly. I'm just going to solve for x, and once I have it, then I can find any of my 6 ratios, because then I'd have all the parts. Okay, so all I have to do is Pythagorean theorem to figure out what x is. Yeah, so I'll have x squared plus, now be careful with this, you want to do negative root 2 squared equals 3 squared. So just be careful with your signs and your roots. So what is negative root 2 squared? 2, positive 2. I get a 9, so x squared equals 7. When I take the square root of 7, what comes out? I don't know what it is as a decimal, but doesn't the square root of 7 have two answers? Positive square root of 7 and negative square root of 7?
Yes.
Which one do I use?
Plus.
Yes, because look at where I am. I went in the positive direction for x. Had I gone in the negative direction, I would use the negative root. But in this case, I'm in the positive, so I only want the positive square root of 7. I'd want to make that point because sometimes you'll need the negative root. So now that I know that x is the square root of 7, I can go ahead and find cosine and tangent. And anything else I needed to find. So cosine is x over r. So that would just be square root of 7 over 3. And then I also had to find tangent. And tangent is y over x.
What angle are you using for the, because, for opposite or adjacent?
Well,
Like, how do you know which one to use?
it's always, well, it's this one or this one. They'd be the same.
Oh,
Yeah. So y over x would be a negative root 2 over root 7, and then I do just have to fix that. So I get a negative root 14 over 7 for my tangent. And that's it. So is that so bad? You just got to think about it and make sure that you're in the right quadrant. So I'll help you set up G. Find sine and cosine given that cotangent is equal to that and theta is in quadrant 2. Okay. Well, cotangent is x over y. And we know that we're in quadrant 2, so they're saving us some effort here. So in a fraction, if you have a negative out in front of a fraction, it could go with the 7 or the 24, right? Right? But if I'm in quadrant 2, who must it go with? Couldn't this be called negative 7 over positive 24 or 7 over negative 24? Right? If I'm in quadrant 2, though, it matters who you attach that negative to. Right, I went negative 7 in the x direction and y is a positive 24. So now that I have this, can I just find r and then I can find all the pieces? Right, you with me? All right.